Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. Massive thanks to the authors, Roxi2Star and ThatOneZed for allowing me to adapt their awesome story. Follow the link in the description to check out more of their works. Today we will be listening to the 20th part of What If Deku Had Both One for All and All for One. If you enjoy, please consider liking, commenting, and subscribing down below, and don't forget to hit that bell icon so you get notified when videos go live. Now, without further ado, let's get into the video. Chapter 40, We'll Cry Later. Chapter by Roxi2Star. Night 5. Shoto sat across from Bakugo, with Shinsu next to him and Eureka beside Bakugo. Ida occupied the seat across the aisle. Each of them had food they were picking at in silence. Shoto was simply forcing the food down. He wasn't hungry, but he knew that if he didn't eat, he'd come to regret it. It was uncertain what they would be going up against tonight. All Shoto knew was that by the end of it, he would be holding Izuku in his arms, even if it killed him. Bakugo seemed to be in a similar state, pushing the food around his bento with his chopsticks aimlessly. He had barely spoken a word since they left the hospital, and it was almost odd seeing him like this, not screaming every few minutes. Shoto honestly missed it. You know, Eureka said quietly, no one wants us to do this. I'm sure Deku-kun will freak out with us, putting ourselves in danger like this. Bakugo turned to her with a glare on his face. Are you saying you want to bail? No. She snapped. Absolutely not. We're going to help Deku-kun in any way we can, but... She hesitated. I can't help but wonder if what we're doing is right. Shoto couldn't blame her for this line of thinking. If it were anyone other than Izuku who had been taken, he might have even thought the same thing. But this was Izuku. Izuku once told me that meddling when you're not supposed to is what being a hero is all about, he said quietly. I know what we're doing is selfish and dangerous, but I can't turn back now. I don't think I'll be able to live with myself if we do. Shinsu sighed deeply. Me either, he said. I'm sick and tired of being useless. Midoriya has helped me so much. I can't not do this. I'm going to give this everything I have. Ida remained quiet in his seat, drumming his fingers on the armrest. Eventually, their train arrived in Kamino Ward, a massive red light district full of seedy bars and cheap stores. Shoto and Bakugo led the group to their first stop, a cheap second-hand clothing shop they had discovered on the internet during their 2 days of planning. Find something that blends in with the area, Shoto told them. It's a flashy place, Bakugo said. So go all out. We'll be even more out of place if we dress too plainly. Try and make yourselves look older, he ordered. If you need help, come to me. He grabbed Shoto by the arm. You're coming with me, half-face, I don't trust you to not make yourself look stupid. Honestly, Shoto couldn't even argue with that. In the end, they all looked pretty good, well, maybe not good, but they certainly blended in with the area. Bakugo had done a pretty good job at making them look older too. Who knew he had so much experience with fashion and makeup? After they were dressed properly, they used the locator to lead them to their target. It pulled them away from the busy streets to the back streets, which seemed to be a more industrial area with factories and warehouses lining the dark streets. Shoto held the locator in his hand as they approached the correct building. This should be it. It does kind of look like a villain's hideout, Shinsu said, but are we sure this is the place? The villain Yaeorozu tract has been here all day, he said, so we know that at least this place is tied to Izuku's captors. Shoto put the locator back in his small bag. We should keep moving. Todoroki-kun, Ida said, just because the villains are here doesn't mean Midoriya-kun is. We have to be very careful. The only one here equipped for stealth is Shinsu-kun. He paused. If we end up in a fight of any kind, I will be pulling the plug on this mission. Todoroki-kun, you once saved me from taking on a villain when I couldn't measure up. I'll save you from it as well. Shoto nodded. Thanks, he said quietly. Though, to himself, he couldn't help but think that there was nothing Ida could do to stop him from getting to Izuku. The area around the building was decently lit, but the building itself looked completely abandoned, probably on purpose to blend in. Buildings like this tend to disappear to the people who live near them. There are a lot of roots growing near the door. There has to be another entrance, he said. Oi, there's another path around back. Let's see if we can find a window, Bakugo said, pointing towards the path. The path was more of an alleyway. That looks like a tight squeeze, Eureka said, her voice right behind Shadow. She was right, they had to walk down it single file and sideways, squeezed between the two buildings' fences. They shuffled along quietly. "Hey," Shinso said from further down the line, "that window looks clear enough to see through." He motioned towards a large window on the second floor. "If I get higher up, I can take a closer look," Shadow said. "Bakugo, let me up on your shoulders," Shadow said. "No dipshit, I'm gonna look." "You're practically blind out of your left eye," Bakugo turned to Eureka. "Round face, hit me with your quirk, and icy hot, you lift me up and keep me from floating away." Eureka reached across and tapped Bakugo. At once, he began to float. Shadow grabbed him by the leg and stood under him, raising his arms up to give him the best height. Bakugo opened his bag, pulling out the pair of night vision goggles Kirishima had given them earlier that day. He raised them up to his eyes and adjusted the settings on them to make them focus. He gasped. "No fucking way." "What?" Shinso asked. "There are cases full of Nomu," he said. "They're just in like, fucking tanks? What the fuck is this, some kind of factory?" All of them felt an awful sense of dread wash over them. They knew firsthand how strong Nomu were. An entire warehouse full. It's more than any of them ever wanted to think about. A loud crash came from the front of the building. Shadow fumbled in surprise, nearly letting go of Bakugo while somehow knocking his black wig off. Eureka had to grab him to keep him from falling. She looked up. "Bakugo, what's going on?" He moved to look. "Holy shit. It's a fucking raid," he said. "Mount Lady, she just crashed her entire upper body into the building. There's police and gang orca, holy fuck, best genist. Tiger's fucking here too, Jesus," he said, leaning forward more. "Nomu storage hangar. Captured and secured," best genist's voice was just loud enough to reach Shadow's ears. Bakugo was grinning. "Fuck, he's so cool," he blushed a bit and composed himself. "Aw man, what an easy job. I knew we should have gone with All Might's team," Mount Lady said, even louder. "All Might's team?" Bakugo asked. "Probably where Deku is." "Oh wait, Tiger just found Ragdoll," he said. "I'm relieved," Ida said softly. "See, the pros have this all under control. And since All Might is probably at the location they're keeping Midoriya, things are going to be just fine," he said. "I mean, it's All Might." Shadow nodded, relief flooding his system as well. They wouldn't have to fight. Izuku was going to be saved. Suddenly, he felt silly for even suggesting they come out here. All Might was more than capable of saving. "I'm sorry, Tiger, but I've had my eye on that quirk for a while now," the most chilling voice Shadow had ever heard cut through the air like a knife. "It was just too good. I had to have it." Worse of all, Shadow knew that voice. It was unmistakable. "Ever since I was reduced to this, I haven't been able to go out and find new quirks as often as I used to." There was no quiet sound of footsteps. But Shadow could feel the energy shift as the speaker must have moved closer. Shadow met the eyes of his friends. All of them were thinking the same thing. "Shall we begin?" That was Midoriya-san's voice. Eureka released Bakugo, who fell to the ground with a gasp, just in time as a loud blast shook their world. The wall that just had Bakugo floating over, the top half was blown away. All of them crouched down in fear. Shadow couldn't bring himself to move or look. Earlier, Izuku was exhausted. He didn't know the time or the day, he wasn't even sure how long he'd been sleeping. He was so out of it that he could barely process what was happening in front of him. He sat on an old couch, his wrists chained in front of him, which was quite frightening. He couldn't sense his quirk, and he hadn't realized how comforting the hum of All for One in his head had been. He leaned against someone, fairly certain it was Shigaraki due to the unpleasant odor. There was a TV in front of them, and the bright light in the dim room felt like it was burning Izuku's pupils. Shigaraki seemed to be engrossed in a video game, sitting close with his legs curled up and his fingers rapidly tapping the controller, pinkies raised on both sides. Suddenly, footsteps signaled someone else entering the room. "Jesus, that kid doesn't look good," Dabi's voice broke the silence. Dabi was Shadow's older brother, a fact Izuku hadn't had the mental space to fully process. Dabi had likely experienced the same abuse as Shadow had. But why was he here when his family believed he was dead? When was the last time anyone fed him? Shigaraki paused his game with a groan. "Damn, we forgot to feed him," he remarked, flicking Izuku's nose. That's probably why he's so boring right now. Fuck you, Izuku squeaked out. Dabi slapped his palm into his forehead. People need to eat, Shiggy, he admonished, turning to the bar. Get this kid some toast, he yelled at Kurogiri. And water. Has he even had anything to drink? No, Izuku's mind supplied. He lay limply against Shigaraki, who had resumed his game. A moment later, Dabi's face filled Izuku's vision. He roughly sat Izuku up. Midoriya, you need to drink this. Can you, or am I going to have to force it down? The best Izuku could manage was to keep his mouth open. Dabi sighed and poured water down his throat. Izuku didn't have a gag reflex, something Shoto had taught him, actually, so the water slid down easily, though some dribbled down his chin. Eventually, Dabi stopped, and Izuku swallowed the rest, panting heavily to catch his breath. More, he requested. Dabi nodded, refilling the glass. Dabi stepped away briefly and returned with a napkin holding 2 pieces of plain toast. Eat this, he instructed, offering a slice. Izuku hesitated before taking a bite, finding it slightly burnt. Did you toast these with your quirk? He asked softly. I did. That's a very useful quirk, Izuku commented. I've always liked fire quirks. Dabi shrugged. They're pretty common, he said. Nothing special about them. My dad has a fire quirk, Izuku mentioned before taking another bite of toast. I like the way fire quirk users smell, he mused. Like campfires. You have it. Smells like Shoto. Dabi's body tensed. I thought All for One was your dad. And don't compare me to that puppet. Izuku glared. My father is not All for One. He might have come from him, but that man was not my father. My dad is a quirk consultant with a terrible sense of humor and a fire-breathing quirk. My dad makes me toast when I'm sick, takes me to get my favorite meal every Saturday, and taught me how to bowl. That's who my father is, he continued. And Shoto isn't a puppet. Certainly not for the living trashcan of a person that's his father. Shoto hates him. Quite frankly, so do I. He's a person who doesn't deserve to call himself a hero. Shoto is his own man. And he's nothing like Endeavor. So don't talk about things you know nothing about, Tou. Dabi shoved the toast into his mouth, cutting him off. Shigaraki looked up from the TV. Will you two shut up? I can't hear my game over you. Dabi, go away. I'm trying to bond with my little brother. By watching you play video games? Well, to be fair, I suppose that is pretty typical older brother behavior, Dabi said. As they spoke, Twice and Himiko entered the room. Oh. Hello, Izuku. She exclaimed and pushed past Dabi, settling into his lap. I have to say, you are looking so cute. Look at your face, it's so beaten up and pale. I wanna suck your blood so bad. I wanna be you, Izu. She cooed, rubbing her face against his. He was too tired to even care or attempt to push her off. Himiko, he looks uncomfortable. Let him suffer. Twice chimed in before taking a seat at the bar. Himiko continued to play with his face, pinching his skin until it turned red. His mind sort of turned into static as the room was gradually filled by the league members. All their conversations seemed to run together, becoming white noise. Izuku felt like he was drifting away, like his body was present but he wasn't. It was what he wanted. He wanted not to think. Izuku couldn't gauge how long he sat there. The noise, the lights, the pain in his body all blended together. Was this his life now? Wasting away while watching Shigaraki play video games? Enduring Himiko's unwanted attention and harassment? It felt like all he could do was lie there, allowing Himiko to touch him as she pleased. He couldn't muster the energy to fight back. He didn't even flinch as her tongue ran across his cheek. If anything, it pushed him further into a deep state, away from this awful moment. Everything smelled terrible, his body ached, and it was unbearably loud. He felt like his head was going to explode. It was better to just float away. His eyes rolled back into his head as he let his mind go blank. A loud knock echoed on the door. Kamino Pizza. A voice called out, muffled in the haze. He was brought back to reality. They'd ordered pizza. Smash. All Might had burst through the side wall, debris flying everywhere as tree branches came into the room and restrained the league members. Himiko was lifted off his lap and pulled away. "You think this'll hold me?" Dabi began before a streak of yellow crashed into the room, delivering a swift kick to Dabi's head, rendering him unconscious. "Not so fast," Gran Torino said. "There's no escape for you villains," All Might declared. "Want to know why?" Izuku would have cried if he could. He found himself too dehydrated to even manage tears. "Because we are here." Hope surged within Izuku's heart. A blur of white, a hero Izuku had never seen before, appeared before him. Clad in an all-white jumpsuit with a hood and red accents, wearing a respirator mask similar to his own weight. Wait. He recognized this outfit. He'd helped design it. Overwhelming relief washed over him. Everything was going to be all right. He was saved. The safest person in the whole world was right here. Izuku summoned the last of his strength to push himself into the waiting arms of his hero. "Dad." "Izu, it's okay," Dad reassured him, picking him up. "I'm here, I've got you." Izuku rested his head on his shoulder and sobbed. "Dad's here." Just a little earlier still. Hisashi perched on top of the building with All Might, Gran Torino, and Kamui Woods flanking him. Endeavor was on the street level coordinating with the police. It had been surprisingly easy to work with Endeavor on this mission, although it was odd. Still, Hisashi wasn't about to complain. All that mattered was getting Izuku back. "All Might," Hisashi said softly, "White Dragon is ready. Let's go." "All right," All Might responded, "let's go get those damn bastards." With that, All Might jumped down to the street level, landing gracefully and quietly. Hisashi followed, sliding down the side of the building, and the other heroes joined them. They all gathered by the side of the bar, while Edgeshot positioned himself for the initial attack at the front of the building. They waited for Edgeshot's signal to proceed. Hisashi's sole mission was to get in and get out with his son. Edgeshot knocked on the door, calling out, "Kamino Pizza." Then, without hesitation, All Might burst through the wall, causing bricks and wood to shatter and splinter as they revealed the inside of the bar. Several villains were scattered throughout the small room, and Hisashi was ready to leap into action. He scanned the room and spotted Izuku sitting upright on a couch. His heart shattered at the sight of his son, who appeared as though he had been through hell. Izuku's arm was clearly broken, his face covered in blood, his skin pale, and his once bright green eyes were glazed over. Worst of all, a villain was casually sitting on top of him, touching him as if she owned him. Hisashi's blood boiled, and he wanted to tear her off his son. Kamui Woods initiated his attack, immobilizing the villains and lifting them from the ground. Hisashi was about to jump into action when he reminded himself that their primary target was the fire quirk user. "You think this'll hold me?" the fire quirk user started to say, a faint blue glow enveloping his body. However, a blur of yellow sped past Hisashi, and Gran Torino sprang into action, delivering a swift kick to knock out the fire user. "Not so fast," Gran Torino declared. "There's no escape for you villains," All Might announced. "Want to know why?" He stepped into the bar, with Hisashi following close behind. "Because we are here." Hisashi rushed to Izuku and stopped in front of him. Confusion crossed Izuku's face before realization dawned. His tension visibly melted away, and he appeared on the verge of tears, though none fell. Izuku sat up, the cuffs on his wrists clanging as he pushed himself forward, wrapping his arms around Hisashi. "Dad!" he cried. "It's okay, Izu," Hisashi whispered, picking him up. "I'm here. I've got you." Izuku leaned his head onto Hisashi's shoulder and sobbed. "Dad's here." Hisashi stroked his hair comfortingly, standing next to All Might. Edgeshot opened the front door, and police officers flooded the room. "It's more than just us here to stop you," he announced. "Endeavor and many police officers are outside." All Might smiled at Hisashi. "Izuku, you did so well," he said softly. He reached over and broke the cuffs on Izuku's wrists, which clattered to the floor. Izuku sighed in relief, wrapping his arms tighter around Hisashi's neck. "You're safe now. Your dad and All Might are here." Izuku nodded, still sobbing into Hisashi's shoulder. "Kurogiri!" Shigaraki shouted. "Bring them over to play." Hisashi snorted. If Shigaraki meant the Nomu, he was in for a rude awakening. Kurogiri shook his head. "The Nomu is set aside for you are gone." All Might turned back toward them. "Sorry, Shigaraki Tamura," he said. "Your league has taken things too lightly." We found your Nomo facility and destroyed it in a synchronized attack. Mount Lady and Best Jeanist are more than enough to take the entire place down. He grinned. It's over, Shigaraki. Shigaraki, Gran Torino chimed in, where's your boss? You may as well tell us. Shigaraki trembled with rage. Kuro. Edge Shot used his quirk to knock Kurogiri out. And no. Shigaraki screamed. No, it can't end like this. He thrashed in his wooden bindings. No no no. I'm supposed to be allowed to destroy whatever I want. Sensei just gave me a little brother. Izuku whimpered at the term, holding Hisashi tighter. I hate you. Shigaraki screamed. Where is he, Shigaraki? All Might demanded. Fuck you. A foul stench permeated the room, and black ink seemed to ooze out of thin air. It dripped through the air as Nomua began crawling out of the ink. Hisashi recognized that quirk. It was one of his. What the hell? I thought you knocked Kurogiri out, Edge Shot. Damn it, the Nomua keep coming. I did. Edge Shot yelled. This isn't him. No, Hisashi whispered. Izuku coughed, spitting up the black ink, which poured from his mouth. He tried to speak, but the ink continued to drip over his body as Izuku gagged. He was melting in the ink. Izu. Hisashi screamed, attempting to hold him tighter, but the ink spread, and Izuku melted into nothing right in his hands. No, 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 he cried, grabbing at the ink that slowly vanished. His son had been teleported away. The same fate befell each of the League members. Ink poured from their mouths, and they all melted into nothing, leaving only the Nomua behind. They had escaped. I'm so sorry. Kamui Woods yelled. Don't worry, kid. It's not your fault. Gran Torino reassured him. That power seems to be able to pick certain targets to transport, so there was nothing we could do to stop it. Hisashi had completely forgotten about the ink teleportation. It had been a new acquisition just before his split, and he couldn't recall All for One's powers off the top of his head. A Nomua jumped at Hisashi, and he prepared to blast it away, but All Might intervened with a powerful punch that sent the Nomua flying. Dragon, let's go. I have a feeling All for One took Izuku to the warehouse, All Might said, and Hisashi nodded. They turned toward the wreckage of the bar, and Endeavor, who was still engaged in battle, shouted, Hold on. Hisashi grabbed onto All Might's back, and the hero jumped, flying through the city at a breakneck speed. The warehouse wasn't far and quickly came into view. Hisashi assessed the scene and noticed that it was in ruins. A massive explosion had recently occurred, and pro-heroes were scattered about. A man stood alone, floating just above the ground, a man Hisashi knew all too well. As they landed, Hisashi jumped off All Might and landed on a crumbled wall. What the heck are you kids doing here? He asked, addressing the 5 teenagers with red and white hair who were standing behind a partially destroyed wall. Shadow couldn't move. The blast had just gone off. The man with Midoriya-san's voice was clapping. That's the number 4 best genist for you. He said. What an impressive quirk. I was going to blast them straight to hell, but you held onto them by the fibers of their clothes. Most impressive indeed. You saved their lives. He laughed, and it was like cold water straight down Shadow's back. There was a loud sound of something tearing. Best genist made a choked noise. The villain continued. Your quirk is so strong thanks to your dedicated training. I won't need it, however. After all, it doesn't suit Tomura at all. An awful scent filled Shadow's nose. He nearly gagged on it. Eureka's sensitive stomach had her doubling over at the smell. A loud gasp echoed from the battlefield. D-Dad. That was Izuku's voice. Shadow swiftly turned, gripping the wall. He and Bakugo had the same idea, climbing up simultaneously, their eyes locking onto Izuku. He had appeared out of nowhere, accompanied by the black liquid from which the League members had all been oozed out. You failed again, Tomura, the villain taunted. But there will be more chances to succeed. That's why I brought along your merry little band of misfits with you. You'll be allowed to try again. The villain's masked face turned toward Izuku. And of course, we couldn't forget your little brother. Shadow's mind whirled in confusion. Little brother? Was that really Midoriya-san? How had he ended up here? Why would he? Shadow couldn't make sense of what was happening. He pulled himself up the wall, determined to reach Izuku and save him. Ida tugged on both him and Bakugo, whispering urgently, No, if you go out there, you'll die. Meanwhile, Midoriya-san, or whoever he was, continued to speak. After all, Tomura, all of this is for you. Suddenly, the sky exploded with the sound of a mighty crash. All Might had descended, ready to deliver a powerful punch. But the villain intercepted it, holding All Might's fist as if it were nothing. Panic surged through Shadow. Then, something landed on the wall next to them. Everyone turned to look, and Shadow's eyes widened as he recognized the newcomer. He was tall, dressed entirely in white with red accents. The hero's outfit was oddly reminiscent of Izuku's costume. As the hero pulled back his hood, confirming his identity, Shadow's heart swelled with relief. It was Midoriya-san. We came to rescue Izuku, Shadow blurted out, overwhelmed by the emotions flooding his senses. Midoriya-san shot them a glare. Idiots, he hissed. Wait, this might work in our favor. He paused and then instructed them, stay hidden. I'm going to get Izuku away from that monster. It'll be up to you to take him as far away from here as possible. Yes, sir. Shadow responded eagerly. We will, uncle. Bakugo added. With that, Midoriya-san turned away, his determined eyes locked on the ongoing battle. Stay here. Don't move from this spot, he cautioned them. Don't interfere, no matter what happens. It's our job to protect you. With those words, he ran toward the fray, ready to confront the terrifying power of All for One and rescue his son. Izuku was fed up with being kidnapped. Currently, he lay on the ground, clutching a massive piece of rubble for dear life. The wind pressure from each of All Might's punches and All for One's blocks was immense, threatening to blow him away. You're not going to hurt anyone again, All for One. All Might shouted, launching another powerful punch. All for One chuckled. Oh, All Might, are you trying to kill me again? He taunted. The bar is 5 kilometers from here, and it took you a whole 30 seconds to arrive after I stole Izuku from you. You're losing it. So are you, All Might retorted. What's with the mask? Are you sure you can fight in that state? I should be asking the same of you, All for One responded, sending All Might flying back with a powerful blast of wind. Tomura, take Izuku and run. Get him somewhere safe. Black tendrils extended from his fingers, forcibly activating Kurogiri's quirk. A black, misty portal opened up behind the League members. Go. He ordered. Compress, grab Izuku. Shigaraki commanded. Izuku managed to pull himself up onto his feet, determined not to be taken again. Despite his injuries, he wouldn't give up without a fight. Compress turned toward him, preparing to sprint. In an instant, Izuku transformed into a rabbit using his full cowl, which granted him increased agility. He dodged Compress's attempt to grab him with finesse. Before Compress could make another move, flames erupted between them as his father, his real father, leaped over Izuku and landed a powerful kick to Compress's chest. Keep your filthy hands off my son! Dad roared, exhaling a torrent of bright fire that forced the villains back. Izuku joined his father's side, reverting to his true form. Dad! He exclaimed. I'm so happy you're here. He took a fighting stance, determined to protect himself and his father. Dad sighed, clearly worried about his injured son. Izu, stay down. You're hurt, he cautioned. I'm fine. Izuku insisted, his determination shining through. I still have working limbs. I can fight. He activated One for All, its power surging through him. Besides, 6 villains versus 2 Midoriyas. Izuku extended his fist toward his father. Dad nodded in agreement. They don't stand a chance. They exchanged a fist bump and leaped into action. Spinner and Big Sis Magna were their next opponents. Izuku unleashed 20% of One for All to smash into Spinner's massive sword, shattering it into pieces. He then used his quirk to pull Spinner toward him, landing a powerful punch that fractured his right arm in the process. Meanwhile, Dad was engaged in a fierce battle with Magni, who was using her magnetic quirk to manipulate him. She swung at Dad, and he went down hard, but he quickly recovered, his head bleeding. With another fiery blast, he forced Magna to retreat. Twice and Himiko moved in to confront Izuku. Izuku! Himiko called out, extending her arms. Come with us. Let's drink each other until there's nothing left. Her eyes gleamed with anticipation. Izuku growled and used pull, one of Spinner's blade shards, to cut Himiko's cheek. The blood from the wound froze her in place. Himiko twice yelled, turning to grab her instead. As the battle raged on, the ground shook beneath them as All Might and All for One continued their epic clash. "We need to go," Compress shouted. "Shigaraki, if you won't leave, I'll force you." "No," Shigaraki shouted, running toward the portal. He was quickly touched by Compress, who turned him into a capsule. "Sensei, you'll lose if you keep fighting," he warned. "That's it," Compress said as he retreated with Kurogiri. "Time to go." He grabbed Kurogiri, and they disappeared into the black mist portal, which vanished as well. The league had escaped. Well, almost the whole league. Dabi remained behind, unconscious and lying face down on the ground. Izuku stopped short of him, conflicted. Dabi had shown some unexpected kindness, feeding Izuku and giving him water. Moreover, he was Shoto's older brother, making him family to the man Izuku loved. "They left him behind," Izuku whispered. Dad stopped at his side. "That's sad. He'll be all right. The police will question him, and if he cooperates, he might get a reduced sentence." "Now, Izuku, see that wall?" Dad pointed. "Your friends are there. Shoto's there. They came to rescue you, so let them." Izuku gasped as another clash between All for One and All Might shook the ground. "But what about you and All Might? All for One is insane." "We'll be fine," Dad assured him, but just then, All Might was sent flying once more, crashing into rubble. Gritting his teeth, he added, "Izuku, run." A black blur moved into the corner of Izuku's vision. A hand wrapped around his throat and pulled him along. He was shocked it didn't break his neck. His feet were dangling off the ground. All for One had a death grip on his neck. "So that's what I look like from the outside," All for One said. He pulled Izuku close. "It's a pleasure to meet you." All for One paused, and Izuku could feel the sinister aura radiating off of him. Midoriya Hisashi. Chapter 41, or Cry Now. Chapter by Roxi2Star. Shoto would like to pretend that he had to be forcibly held back to prevent himself from jumping over the wall to get to Izuku when the villain named All for One snatched him up and held him by the neck. Shoto felt true terror in his veins because Izuku was in danger. He wanted to save him, but Shoto couldn't move. His body was stuck to the spot on the wall in fear. He could only watch as All for One strangled Izuku. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Midoriya Hisashi," All for One said. "I've been quite anxious to meet you since Izuku told me about you," he gave a loud laugh. "We have some things we should discuss. Don't you agree?" Midoriya-san looked downright murderous, smoke pooling at his mouth. "Put my son down, you son of a bitch!" he yelled but made no move forward. All for One pulled Izuku close to his chest, pressing Izuku's back into him. Izuku thrashed in his grip, clawing at his hand. Now, he said. "Izuku, stop struggling so much. I know you'd like to break the skin and drink my blood, but I assure you that won't happen. Now be a good boy and hold still." He paused. "Before I make you," his hand around Izuku's neck twitched. Izuku screamed in pain. Shoto's body twitched as his heart ached. Stop!" Izuku cried. His body went slack in his grip. Fuck you!" he hissed but stopped struggling. "There, that's much more like it." He turned back towards All Might and Midoriya-san. "Before we begin, Hisashi, I have a few questions for All Might." All Might pulled himself up. "Put Izuku down," he said. "He has nothing to do with..." "Nothing to do with this?" All for One asked. "Why, Izuku has everything to do with this. He's your successor after all. You picked him. I have to say I'm impressed. He's certainly my favorite so far," he said. "Picked him? All Might picked Izuku to be his successor?" Shoto glanced at Bakugo. Bakugo looked just as bewildered as Shoto felt. What the hell was going on? "Did you know?" All for One asked. "You must have known, right? That Izuku is my son? That my blood runs through his veins?" "What?" Shinsuo asked. That's a lie, right? That's impossible. Midoriya can't be." "Yeah, Deku's definitely Midoriya-san's son, right?" Yurika asked, her voice quiet and hoarse. "Right." Ida and Bakugo both exchanged looks with Shoto. "Deku's quirk?" Bakugo began. It's not the craziest thing in the world. What? Shinsu snarled. Bakugu, shut the fuck up. There's no way. Todoroki, tell him he's being stupid or... Shouto shook his head. It doesn't matter, he said quietly. Even if he is, I know Izuku. I know that Izuku's kindness is unwavering. Even if it's true, it doesn't matter. Your parents don't define who you are. Izuku is Hisashi's son, All Might spat. I'm Hisashi, All for One said simply. What? Shouto blinked several times. What the fuck does that mean? But Midoriya-san was right there? Were there two of them? He was so confused. All Might growled. You might be a Hisashi. But Midoriya Hisashi is Izuku's father. He's also my closest friend. I'm well aware of Hisashi's less than conventional origins, as well as the quirk Izuku was born with. He took a step forward. Shouto could see the dangerous gleam in his eye from here. Those two are the most precious people in the world to me. I will not allow you to harm them. Shouto noticed as he spoke, the villain the league left behind was waking. His head lifted from the ground. He looked around, seemingly realizing he had been left behind. He stayed put, now watching the confrontation with the rest of them. All for One laughed. What? He asked. He pulled Izuku up closer to his masked face. Do you consider them to be your family, All Might? My son and my clone? That's the funniest thing I've ever heard. He said. Clone? Shouto asked out loud. And ironic. You found a successor in my son. I found a successor in Nana Shimura's grandson, he said. That's who Tomura once was. All Might went rigid. He's what? Tomura is Nana's grandson. And he hates you, he laughed, it was like nails on a chalkboard. And here you've gone and turned my own son against me. But don't worry too much about it, All Might. I'm going to fix all of that tonight. You've taken so much from me. My son, my health, and my memories. I'm going to regain them, all thanks to you. I doubt Izuku and I would have crossed paths if you hadn't taken him to be your successor. And of course, I doubt Hisashi and I would have met either. Midoriya-san gritted his teeth and pulled down his mouthguard. What do you want? He asked, his voice calm. You want something, right? Just spit out your terms. Ah, you know me so well. I suppose it makes sense. You are me after all. Well, simply put, Hisashi. I want you, he said and pointed with his free hand. I'd like us to become one, once more. I want all those happy memories of my wife in your head. I know you also have the ones of our dearly departed younger brother, don't you? I'm quite eager to have them. As well as that body of yours. I haven't looked that good in a while. And then what? Midoriya-san asked. He took a slow step forward. Are you going to let Izuku go? What about All Might? Are you even considering what taking me back will mean for you? He asked, will you still be able to kill All Might after gaining 5 years worth of memories of falling in love with him? Gasps echoed in the warm summer air. Izuku's eyes had widened to the size of saucers. The villain lying on the ground, Shouto, and the others, as well as All Might. Hisashi, he said quietly. What then? You'll have this intense love for him inside you. Can you really kill someone you love? You're a monster, All for One, but I doubt together we're that cold. He took another step forward. But if you promise to let Izuku go, to allow him to leave this place and run away to safety, I'll do it. Izuku screamed, Dad, no. He began to thrash in All for One's grip again. Please, you can't. Dad. His quirk activated as he attempted to wrangle himself free. No. I can't lose you. Shouto's heart was breaking. He wanted so badly to hold Izuku. To comfort him. To take him away from this awful place. Tears threatened his own eyes. He held them at bay. Hisashi. All Might yelled, don't. Midoriya-san kept walking. His stride even. So, how about it, All for One? Do you think you can handle becoming part of me? All for One seemed to consider the option. We'll see whose will survives. That's the deal then? I allow Izuku to leave, and then we shall become one. Yes, Midoriya-san said. No. Izuku screamed. All Might, please stop them. All for One gripped Izuku's neck tighter, cutting off his words. Izuku was sobbing, his body twitching as tears rolled down his cheeks. Shoto grit his teeth. The Kugu was fuming next to him. Uraraka was crying. Ida slammed his fist into the wall. They wanted to help. They had to help. Midoriya-san closed the distance until he and All for One were standing in front of each other. All for One floated back down to the ground. Their height and build were identical. Each of them held up a hand towards the other. Dad. Izuku whined. PL please. I still need you, he said softly. Shoto had to strain to hear him. Dudon Tiko. I can't. You promised. Midoriya-san sighed. I'm sorry, Izu. No, you promised, you said you'd never go again. You promised me, I promised you I'd always come home, and you promised me. I still need you. This isn't fair. He raised his voice. He turned and glared at All Might. Actually glared at him. All Might. All Might stood frozen, looking between Izuku and Midoriya-san. His fists clenched. Unable to decide who to save. Stop him. I don't care what happens to me, just someone stop him. Izuku screamed. Shinsu jumped up. Shoto's heart leapt into his throat. Shinsu cleared the wall. Shoto jumped on top of it, trying to grab him. Shinsu, he called. Hey, All for One. Shinsu screamed. Everyone turned to look. All Might, Izuku, Midoriya-san, the villain lying on the ground, even Best Jeanist who, wow, he stayed conscious during all that? And of course, All for One turned. Shoto felt his stomach flip as that intense gaze turned in his direction. Shinsu hesitated, but only for a moment. What's up, bitch? And just who are All for One began. He stopped mid-sentence. His body was frozen. Shinsu had taken control. Put Midoriya Izuku down, Shinsu ordered. Without a word, All for One dropped him. Fuck, he's hard to control, fuck move. He screamed. It wasn't Izuku or Midoriya-san who moved. It wasn't even All Might. The fire-using villain on the ground jumped into action. In a flash of blue flames, he blew past All for One. He scooped up Izuku and Midoriya-san and ran like hell toward where Shinsu and Shoto stood. Shoto jumped from the wall. The Kugu, Uraraka, and Ida all pulled themselves up onto it. Shit. The villain yelled and dropped them down. He threw up a firewall. Give him back. All for One yelled. I can't believe I did that. Shinsu's nose was bleeding. A loud crash came from behind the wall of blue fire. All Might and All for One must be fighting again. Shoto, Shinsu, all of you. Izuku cried. Shoto couldn't help himself. He threw his arms around Izuku, pulling him close. Izuku leaned into his touch. And Dabi. You saved us. Why did you do that? Dabi, the villain, laid his hands on his knees, panting. Fuck, I don't know. My body just moved on its own. Didn't plan that. Fuck. We need to go, he said. Izuku, make your dad and your friends leave. I'm not leaving, Midoriya-san said, raising his mask back up. All Might is almost out of time. He needs me here to give him backup. Izuku, go with Shoto. Leave. But Dad. God damn it, Izuku, you are leaving right fucking now. His father snapped. I don't care if I need to knock you out and make them drag you away, but I lost you twice. I'm not doing it a third time. All Might and I will be fine. All for One can't take me by force, and he just lost his fucking leverage, all thanks to Shinsu. He turned back towards the fight. Fucking, go. Izuku's eyes widened, his breath catching. Wait, Dad. I have an idea. He said, pulling away from Shoto and grabbing his father, placing his hand on his face. Make him draw blood, and it's over. Midoriya-san's eyes widened. Izuku, he said. Then, it occurred to Shoto. Izuku's quirk. Give and take. He must have given his father a quirk. Oh god, blood curdle. Izuku had just given his father blood curdle. Okay. He turned his head towards Dabi. Get them out of here. Don't pull anything. Dabi rolled his eyes. I just saved your asses, don't go threatening me now, he said. I'm heading off. Come with us. Izuku said, grabbing Dabi's coat and pulling him closer to the group. I'm serious. You can start over. We can help. He turned to Shoto as another crash came from beyond the fire. Go. Midoriya-san screamed before he jumped back into the action. Deku, let's go. Bakugo screamed. Izuku, they're right. Shoto picked him up, carrying him bridal style. Dabi, just come with us. You saved him, that's enough for me. Dabi growled and simply jumped up the wall. Fucking fine. Let's go, kids, Dabi said and led the way. They all made it back over the wall and ran as far from the fight as possible. As they ran, a news helicopter rolled overhead. Shoto held Izuku to his chest as he followed the group away and back to the city. Izuku clung to him tightly. Shoto was never letting go again. The Kamino ward was full of people. No one really paid them mind as the group made their way through the crowds. Izuku quickly figured out why. A news broadcast had just started, covering the fight at the factory they had just fled. Dabi stopped, and the rest stopped behind him. He had his hood up. This is real, right? Izuku asked softly. Yes, Shoto whispered softly. Izuku had missed that husky voice. We're here. We came to rescue you. All of us. Kiken was right behind Shoto, looking over his shoulder. We wouldn't have let you stay there, Deku. Izuku smiled brightly and buried his face into Shoto's neck. I'm so happy to see you. I'm scared. Dad and All Might are still back there. Dad had said All Might was out of time. If they didn't finish the fight quickly, All Might would burn out. He could only hope Dad could get a cut on All for One, and freeze him with blood curdle. If they did that, they might stand a chance. Oh shit, Dabi said. Look. The fight. They all looked up, the camera had zoomed in. All Might had slammed All for One's head into the ground, shattering his mask. But All Might himself. What's wrong with All Might? Someone in the crowd nearby asked. All Might was starting to deflate. His left side of his face had returned to its skeletal form. Oh no, Izuku said, pushing himself up more. All Might. He won't last, he whispered. That's... Shoto started. Holy fuck, Kiken said, his eyes wide. Deku-kun, isn't that? Okako asked. Midoriya-kun, that's... Izuku was sobbing but he choked out yes, he said, that's Yagi-san. Shoto nearly dropped him in surprise, only to redouble his grip and pull him closer. Oh my god. Izuku, this is I, he was speechless. What? Dad pushed forward again, a glint of a blade in his hand. He must have picked up one of Spinner's broken blade shards. Dad was fast, using his fire breath to obscure All for One's vision. He slashed his blade. All for One in turn let off a powerful blast, sending Dad flying back. His white suit is torn as he slams into a pile of rubble. Hisashi. Get away from him. All Might yelled, his voice booming. Yellow electricity coursed through his body. That looked like no way. Izuku gasped. Yagi's One for All didn't look like that. Not normally but... Come on All Might, Izuku rasped out. Come on. He can do this, Shoto said, he can. Kiken let out a scream. Fuck, come on All Might. Fucking goddamn it. Dabi cursed. Do it, you son of a bitch. The entire crowd erupted into cheers. All of them yelling, screaming, and crying for All Might. For All Might to win, to live, to be okay. Izuku let out every scream he'd been holding in since he got kidnapped. This was his fault. All Might was at his limit because of his weakness. If All Might didn't survive, he wouldn't be able to forgive himself. But he believed in All Might. All for One winded back his fist, power coursing through it as it grew massive. He pulled back ready to unleash his final blow, but his body quivered. He was frozen. The far shot showed Dad, holding a blade to his lips. He'd frozen him. He'd done it. 1,000,000%. All Might cried, his body shooting forward like a lightning bolt. United States of Smash. The impact of the hit was huge. Reverberations of it reached them where they stood in the center of the Kamino ward. The very ground shook underneath them. Izuku clung to Shoto harder. Shoto in turn held him tighter. Once the ground stopped quivering under their feet, Izuku looked back at the screen. All for One was down. He wasn't moving. All Might stood over him, half his hero costume destroyed. Another camera crew must have gotten in closer, This shot was a ground level one. All Might raised his fist above his head. Victory! Yes! Izuku screamed, fresh tears rolling down his cheeks. Cheers! The cheers were deafening. Izuku didn't care. All Might had done it. He'd defeated All for One. It was over. Dad was there and safe. All Might was safe. Izuku and all his friends were safe. Shoto cupped his cheek with one hand, kissing him in rejoice. Izuku kissed back happily, before finally pulling away. He and Shoto gently touched their foreheads together. He was crying too. They pulled back to look at the large screen. The All Might on screen looked at the camera. His eyes glinted in the darkness. He held up his hand, a long skeletal finger pointed right at the camera. His voice was hoarse, and dry as he spoke. Now, it's your turn. Every hair on Izuku's body stood up. No. No way he'd. All Might had spent every last of himself in that fight? All Might was. Oh my god, he didn't think anyone but Shoto could hear him over the screams of joy. The camera kept rolling. Tojinori. That was Dad's voice. White passed the camera. His father was running right to All Might. Tosh. The audio was much more clear from this shot. You're okay. He cried. His father was crying. He could see the glint of tears, his suit torn, his mask broken, and he was covered in dirt and blood. He slid down the small crater of dirt All Might's final smash had created. Dad landed right next to All Might. Tosh, say some mph. All Might kissed him. He'd grabbed him by the hip and shoulder, pulled him close, and kissed him. The camera zoomed in. Izuku watched, his jaw dropping. All Might pulled back. I love you too, he said, fat tears rolling down his skeletal face. I've loved you since I met you on that beach, I think. Dad laughed, tears now streaming down his cheeks. You idiot, he said, before grabbing him and kissing him again. Are you okay with that? Shoto whispered. Yeah, Izuku said. And he was. Dad and Yagi made each other happy. They deserved to be together. They both deserved to have a life partner. More pros had shown up on the scene. Endeavor taking up the role of leader in All Might's stead. They quickly had All for One restrained and heading towards a secure vehicle. Deku, Kaken called. He wasn't crying but there were tear stains on his face. You have a lot of fucking explaining to do. After we get you to a hospital. Dabi sighed. Speaking of, you should head towards one, right now. What about you? Shoto asked. You were unconscious for a long time, you should get checked out. And then what? Get arrested? Or did you forget whose side I'm on? Dabi asked. Well. Whose side I was on? Doesn't matter. I'm still a criminal. I still kidnapped your little boyfriend there. Izuku glared at him. Don't give me that crap, he snapped. You saved my life. Before that, you were the only one who took care of me there. You can have a second chance. He hesitated. He technically hadn't outright confirmed Izuku's accusation back at the bar, and if he was wrong, it would devastate Shoto. Izuku said fuck it. Your family misses you, Tuya. Shoto gasped. Dabi met Shoto's eyes. Tuya? He asked softly. That's Izuku, are you sure? He nods yes, he said his quirk. His age. His hatred for Endeavor. He knows you. And his eyes Shoto. I told you, I'd know that color anywhere. Dabi growled and turned away. He shoved his hands into his pockets. He didn't turn his head but he spoke. I'll be in touch. Get yourselves fixed. I'm a big boy. I'm fine. Shao, he kept very still. How tall is Natsuo now? Shoto's lips quivered, almost as tall as Dad now. God damn it. Why is that stupid fucker so tall? Of all the things to inherit from our father, and that lucky bastard gets his height, Dabi sighed and shook his head. He held up a hand in goodbye. Shao, we'll meet again, then he vanished into the crowd. Shinso groaned. Dude, I'm so fucking confused right now, he sighed. Midoriya is apparently the son of a supervillain, has a godlike quirk, Midoriya-san is a clone. All Might is Yagi-san, they're dating now we guess, and a league member is Todoroki's dead brother. That about sums it up, Shinso-kun. Now can we please go to the hospital? I think I'm dying, Izuku said softly. Alright, that's where we'll leave off for the day. Thanks so much for listening along with me today. If you enjoyed, please like and comment down below and check out the video or playlist on the screen for more content from me. I look forward to seeing you next time. Ciao for now, lovelies.